you have to be mindful of how you talk to yourself, right? Because if you don't appreciate yourself, then no one else is going to appreciate you.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Career Flipper podcast. I'm Jenny Dempsey, your host, a furniture flipper, and someone who's fully experienced the what the heck am I doing with my life spiral that comes with a career change. This show actually started during one of those exact spirals. I got laid off from my job in customer experience, applied to hundreds of new jobs, and heard nothing except rejections. So I did what any logical person would do. I picked up junk furniture off the street and taught myself how to flip it in my garage. Covered in paint, sanding through my feelings, and figuring it out as I went. No, I had no idea how to do this beforehand. And if you want to check out my furniture flips, visit me on Instagram and TikTok under San Diego Furniture Flipper. But anyways, in between scrubbing grime and crying into wood filler, I kept wondering, how do other people get through this? Like the real stuff, the messy, non-linear, and my totally nuts stuff. So I just started asking people. I found them on LinkedIn and I saw they did a career change. So I was like, how did you do it? And what I found were stories full of courage, self-doubt, resilience, and hope. The kind that reminds you that starting over doesn't have to be glamorous to be good. Now, every week on this podcast, I talk to regular, everyday, amazing people who've totally flipped their careers. Some jumped, some got pushed, but all of them figured out how to create something new, something more aligned, more joyful, more them. New episodes drop every week, so make sure to follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And if something hits you right in the gut, in a good way, I hope, leave a review and tell me about it. All right, let's get into today's episode. Laura Hatcher from Alexandria, Virginia, went from serving as a Navy captain to becoming a full-time professional photographer. We talk about what it's really like to transition out of the military and try to figure out who you are without the uniform. Laura opens up about imposter syndrome, self-doubt, and learning how to embrace her creative voice after decades of structure and service. There is so much heart in this conversation, from finding mentorship and building community to setting goals she wasn't sure she was ready for, to navigating her own cultural identity while stepping into new spaces. We also talk about how the pandemic forced her to adapt, how she balanced her passion for photography with her full-time responsibilities, and how she slowly grew from hobbyist to full-on pro, trusting herself along the way and learning more every day. So if you're in the thick of a big transition or trying to figure out how to turn the thing you love into something real, Laura's story is really going to hit home. Let's get into the episode now. Laura, it is so great to have you here on the Career Flipper. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm great, and thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, I'm so excited to have you. And I was kind of like fangirling because I know you've listened to the podcast for a while and we follow each other on Instagram. And I have just, over the past several months have just like seen the work that you do and just like how you show up and what you bring to the table. And I am just so excited to pick your brain about how you got to be to this place. And also, selfishly, my dad, my grandpas, we're all in the military. So it's very like near and dear to my heart. So I am just like really excited to chat with you. So Lauren, tell everybody about you and what you're doing now, and then we'll dive into the career flip.
Okay. So I am currently the proud owner of a small company run by me. I'm owner and operator of Laura Hatcher Photography. I've been a professional photographer for about 8 years now. It's my second career, hence the career flipping invitation. I retired as a Navy captain in 2018. And I like to joke, but it's really serious, that I probably am one of the few naval intelligence officers who took her clearances, her security clearances, and ran in the opposite direction from all the three-letter agencies that surround my neighborhood in the DC area. So I'm in Northern Virginia, very close to DC. And I quickly discovered after working like one job, barely, that working for somebody else after you've been institutionalized in the military is completely overrated. And so what I like to say is that I took my pension and I ran towards my passion. And my pension, my health care from being a veteran is what's fueling the ability for me to follow my passion. So,
Wow. I love that. You're running for your passion. So how did you start that run? How did you make that decision to flip? Where did everything begin, Laura?
okay, in terms of the photography itself, it was a hobby. I'm an only child. I was raised in a military family, so we moved around quite a bit. Never really fit in anywhere. I was always bored. My parents would joke. I know it's a joke now, but when I was back then, I don't think it was a joke to me. But I would say I'm bored, and my dad would say it's because you're a boring person.
No.
Or he'd say, "Go play in traffic." Now, keep in mind, he was a crusty sailor, okay? These are things you expect to hear from a Navy chief. But, I always had creative outlets because when you're an only child, you have to either make up your own friends or go find them. And I was a professional at finding friends because we moved every 2 to 3 years throughout my entire childhood around the world, different cultures. Uh, and so it really never stopped through my through my adulthood. So in around January of 2015, I decided to take just a basic photography class because it was the dark ages. It's cold, and I just fell in love with it. At first, I didn't. I don't do math in public. I got very scared on the first class because the instructor started talking about f-stops and shutter speeds, and my non-math brain was going, "No, I can't do this." And then he didn't make fun of me, but he kind of looked at my camera and said, "Yeah, that's not a real camera. You need to go buy a real camera." A real camera, so you know, is one that you can take the lens off. It's not a point and shoot. Doesn't matter how much you spent for the point and shoot.
Yes.
That's not a real camera. But once I went and got my Costco package real camera,
Yes.
I I came back and I stuck with it. It was about 9 weeks long. On the weekends, the class was geared to adults who work, and I'm still in the Navy at this point. And he was able to take us to places. I had just moved to DC for my final tour, if you will, last stretch of my career, and he took us to all these places that I didn't know how to get to. So I realized placement and access, if you have a camera, you can get to so many places. And then I was hooked. It was just amazing.
So you started out, you learned it, you weren't too sure at first, then you started to get the right equipment and you saw what it unlocked for you on your path and you just kept going. So
Yes.
when did that kind of pivot into a business from the hobby?
Yeah, see, that's the downside of being a veteran. We are overachievers. We can't just have a hobby. We have to nuke it completely. And it just really became almost like a disease. I couldn't turn it off. It just with photography, you could just continue to learn and learn and learn. There's no end, right? There's so many niches or niches, however you pronounce it. I say niche, but basically your focus could be anywhere. And because I traveled a lot with the Navy and usually to some obscure, boring places, having a camera in hand, I could go and even in the most mundane situations, find something interesting to photograph.
Yeah.
And I started photographing, believe it or not, classic cars. I would go to meetups on weekends in my neighborhood, and it was just a bunch of cool people with some very cool old cars
Yeah.
sitting in the parking lot of like Safeway. And I started, honing my eye and my details, my focus and lighting and all that, just by focusing on the small details that a classic car has, right? With the different
Yeah.
emblems and the fins and then suddenly people started asking me, where can they buy these pictures that I'm taking? And I'm like, buy. And then suddenly I have an LLC, and then suddenly I'm making money, and I'm like, okay, I've just stumbled into business, and I'm sure there's something legal I'm supposed to be doing. because I'm still in the Navy, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and it just flourished in there. And really, what I learned was people who have those classic cars don't necessarily want to spend money on photographs of those classic cars because they're so busy fixing those classic
Right.
cars. So, needless to say, I did have to shift to something a little bit more lucrative once I did get into the business.
Wow. So then you are taking it to the next level as that overachiever and you made it into something. So what were some of the things that you were finding about like, because I know for me, I also can lean into my overachieving tendencies and I just want to start everything. I'm like, I'm going to do this and this and this. And then I have 10 projects and I'm like, okay, let's go. Um, but sometimes when we kind of take that on, I know as overachievers, we have to kind of have conversations with ourselves to be like, all right, let's make this real. And let's see what we actually can work on right now within what we have available to us, time wise, energy wise, financially. So I'm curious, were there things that any like roadblocks or any like challenges that during this time as you're kind of like making this into more that you ran into? And if there are, how did you kind of face them and move forward?
I wouldn't say there were roadblocks per se because I was developing this while I was on active duty, right? So I have a job, I had a
Yeah.
focus, and this was kind of the side hustle, if you will. And but what I would say for anyone who wants to take their hobby and turn it into their jobby, as I like
Yeah.
to say,
Yeah.
um, you need to, if you're self-taught, which I am, you need to understand that you can't just stop at whatever last lesson you have. There's always more to learn,
Hmm.
right? You don't know what you don't know. And more than likely, you haven't learned it the correct way or the legal way, especially when it comes to starting a business.
Hmm.
And so the Navy taught me, and all of us in the service know that we don't get through our career alone. We always have leadership and mentors and accountability buddies. So, believe it or not, I walked in off the street into this small, cozy studio in the heart of Old Town Alexandria, which is where I live. I live in near Old Town Alexandria. I can't actually afford to be in it, but right outside it. So I walked into the studio off the street, and there's this woman running her studio, and I look around and I see her prices, and I said, "Hi," I said, I aspire to be where you are in the future. Would you mind being my mentor?" Okay, I just walked in off the street now, right? But I'm coming in with the confidence of a naval officer, and I explained to her, I'm active duty Navy. I'd like to I do this on the side, but I need to get better.
Yeah.
Would you like to be my mentor? And for like 3 years, we kept in touch. I didn't stalk her or anything. I just kind of used her when I needed it. And she introduced me, and this is the key thing: is she introduced me to higher level of thinking and learning, right? Because if you stay with amateurs, you're basically going to stay at that performance level. But you need to align yourself with people who are going to make you strive to be better. And then, long story short, one day, 3 years later, 3 or 4 years later, she says, "Yeah, I'm going to move. I'm retiring. I'm going to go back closer to my children and grandchildren." I'm like, "Well, how much is this rent?" Thinking there's no way I'm going to be able to afford this in the heart of Old Town Alexandria. And the rent was very reasonable, mainly because it was a hole in the wall with 8-foot drop ceilings, no windows, 500 square feet total. But actually, when it comes down to it, 236 feet to be exact of operational space, which is not a lot of room for a headshot. Um, and keep in mind, I didn't actually know how to do professional headshots.
Hmm.
I just saw an opportunity to get a space in a desired location. And I was like, the Navy's taught me how to sink or swim. I'll figure out the headshot thing later. And,
Wow.
and so I got her studio literally 6 months before the pandemic.
Oh my. Yeah.
This is 1
Okay.
October 2019. I've already been out of the Navy a year. I've already gone through my first job and saw that it wasn't a great idea. So let me pivot and start and go serious, with this
Hmm.
photography thing. But I wouldn't have done it any other way because it was such a reasonable rent. I was able to absorb the cost of sitting on my butt for what seemed to be like 6 months.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, from really it was like March of 2020, which can you believe it's been 5 years?
It's tripping me out. Yeah. Mhm.
5-year anniversary since the P days. Uh, but yeah, so from March to like July maybe,
Yeah.
complete shutdown of all retail spaces. But I was able to kinda absorb that cost, mainly because the rent was reasonable enough. But anyway, that's how I got into my first studio. Just
Oh, yeah. You asked a question. I love that you walked in off the street and you asked a question and then you developed this relationship and you had this mentor and then you're there. Like it's yours. And so I just think that like gosh, it's one thing to have something that we want to do, but if we don't know how to do it or we're not exactly sure, like it's totally acceptable to ask questions. And I just think that that is something that can hold people back where they're like, I don't want to bug them or, oh, I
right.
don't be annoying or I'm a nobody. And like, I get it. But if you don't ask, you may never have the opportunities. And I just like, you are like, that is such a great example of that. So you're still in that space, right? You're still there.
So I just moved out of that space. I stayed
Okay.
there for 4.5 years.
Wow.
Four and
Wow.
a half years. It was a great space. It was I was able to, and it forced me to learn, really understand my gear and the constraints of being in such a small space so that I don't just stay in my studio. I'm an event photographer. I do military ceremonies, I do corporate events, and I do actually take all my gear, all my headshot photography studio gear, and go on sites, on conferences, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I do a lot of different types of photography. So the studio was nice is just to have kind of a home base, if you will.
Mhm.
It also kind of helps with a little, as I was growing this business, have a little bit of credibility, and then also tie myself to a community, right? Which is really important when you're a small business owner, is to be known in that community as part of that business entity.
Yeah.
But yeah, so 4.5 years, and obviously did well enough to be able to afford to move into still a reasonable rent, but twice as much space now.
Wow. That's amazing. So you're in this bigger space now. And what does like a normal day to day look like for you?
Yeah, well, the beauty of being a self employed or solopreneur is that if I don't want to get up, I don't have to.
Yeah.
You know, I always tell people that I'm not a morning person. I faked it for 31 years. And so, I live and die by my calendar, as I know you do as well.
True that.
Um,
Yeah.
and I will tell you, really in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, the focus and emphasis has more been on being a businesswoman as opposed to just a
Mhm.
photographer, and, just learning how to market yourself, how to position yourself, and how to value yourself, both in price and in time and boundaries, which I'm still working on some of those, mainly the boundaries.
Yeah.
Uh, but day to day, to be honest, day to day is very different. Every day is different because, I advertise quite a few things that I do. My headshots alone, I think I have 5 or 6 different types of packages. So
Okay.
just to
Yeah.
give an example, so it's Thursday. Uh, just in the last week, I've been in someone's home for on location headshots. Okay, so which
Yeah.
was exciting because
Yeah.
that's like a completely different environment and palette I've never seen, and I bring in my portable studio gear, and I'm in a new playground. I'm running around looking at different angles, seeing what's going to work, and that went super well, better than I actually expected.
Huh?
And then before that, I was in studio with on Sunday. I'm going backwards in my head. On Sunday, I was teaching. I teach classes to other photographers.
Okay.
On Saturday, I had 2 headshots, and I only try to do 2 in a given day because they're night. I'm a boutique approach,
Mhm.
so I prefer to spend time with people, get them comfortable, give them options, review the images before they leave. And we do it in a series of events so that they can see, okay, the first series, they look a little stiff, or maybe we didn't notice something with their clothes or their hair. And then we go into another series with a different background and a different outfit. And you'll see as the time goes through those 90 minutes, usually towards the end, the pictures are the best, right? Because we're best friends.
Well,
They
yeah.
used to know what to expect.
Yeah.
But the entire time, you see how much energy I have. The entire time, I'm trying to keep these people pumped. So I can only do two because I'm exhausted,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because most people that walk through my door don't want to be there. It's a necessary evil. Their boss sent them. You know,
Mm-hmm.
if the boss is not paying, they're in a bad mood.
You know, I'm all about second chances. And not just in careers, but in life and the way that we care for the things that we love. That's why I love Arlington Woodworks Furniture Balm. It brings wood furniture and cutting boards back to life with just 3 simple natural ingredients: organic flaxseed oil, beeswax, and citrus. It smells amazing, like actually amazing, and it's safe for pets, kids, and food surfaces. It's made in small batches by a Navy veteran husband and wife team who've navigated cancer and still find a way to give back with every purchase. Head over to arlington-woodworks.com and use code FLIPPER for 10% off and give your furniture the second chance it deserves. Again, that is arlington-woodworks.com and use code FLIPPER for 10% off. Yeah.
But yeah, and then week before that, it was headshots, it was teaching, I could be doing events. So and I think that's what I like about it. There's no routine.
Yeah. Yeah. There's no routine. And kind of thinking back to when you were just doing this as like a side gig and you had, you were working full time essentially in the Navy. And so thinking of all you're doing right now and the variety of things, and if you were to think back to when it was just this side gig, how did you juggle that? Because it does sound like there's a lot of different things that you may be, doing or learning or teaching. And so how did you juggle that while working full time?
Yeah, I probably didn't take on as much knowing that I only had the weekends.
Yeah.
And there were also those 3 kids I had and a dog, a husband. There was a few more distractions
You got a lot,
besides the Navy. So I probably didn't take on. And also keep in mind, when I was doing it as a side hustle, the confidence level, and I know you can relate to this, imposter syndrome is real, right? And when you're learning something from scratch, there's this idea that you get in your head that it's supposed to be a certain way because of all the influences that you've seen from Googling or YouTubing or envying somebody else's scroll.
Yeah.
And and it just becomes overwhelming sometimes. So I know I didn't take on as much when it was a side hustle because 1, I didn't have the confidence I could do it. And 2, I just didn't have the time to practice. Now, I'm full time and I get a lot of work. I surround myself with other photographers. They are the best referrals, right? Because a lot of the photographers that I know are side hustle. It's part time for them. And they're not doing work on Monday morning or Tuesday afternoon. They're in their full time job. So I feel like I'm much better at what I do because I have the time to do it all the time.
Yeah. Now that makes a lot of sense. And that's something that I think, when we are thinking about it and we're doing it part time or very, very little on the side, we, dream about those days when we can do it more and not only how much more we'll get done, but how much more we'll learn, how much more community we'll build with that. And so to kind of hear of that, how you juggled it and set boundaries, which it sounds like you did a great job at setting boundaries with everything else that you had to juggle, family life, and all of that, setting boundaries to know what you were able to accomplish at that time. But when you touched on the imposter syndrome, I just got chills because that is so real when we're learning new things. And from what I'm hearing you say, you learn new things and you may not be at this level yet and you're comparing yourself to everyone else out there, like sometimes the momentum can slow. I know for me, sometimes I'm like, okay, well, I didn't do a great job on this, but everyone else looks at it and tells me that it's great. But I'm like, oh no, I could have done better because so-and-so on Instagram or this person. And I'm just like you get in your own head. Do you have any advice of, for someone listening in right now who might be thinking about doing something creative or starting their own business, but they're getting in their head? What is something they could do to kind of help? What's helped you navigate?
Yeah. So, self-talk, right? When talking to yourself, you have to be mindful of how you talk to yourself, right? Because if you don't appreciate yourself, then no one else is going to appreciate you.
Mhm.
And I do. I use a lot of self-deprecating humor, uh, and sometimes I have to be mindful. Okay, you're not just the dumb jock. I mean, that's why I tell everybody, yeah, I'm just a dumb jock that got into the Naval Academy, and they kept me, and I stayed, and I graduated. I know that's not true. I know I'm intelligent, but sometimes, depending on the situation, I need the self-deprecating humor to feel comfortable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you have to be careful not to listen to that deprecating. I call it a roommate, right? The roommate that's in your head sometimes gets in the way. And I'm constantly giving advice to veterans that are transitioning out of the military now, because that's the space that my studio is in. My ideal client is someone who is like me, left the military either after a very long time or a short period of time, and then now they have to rediscover themselves. And the first thing I tell them is, you need to introduce yourself to yourself, right? Because when we were in uniform, that was the brand. That really wasn't us. We're representing our service. And now you're representing yourself. You kind of have to figure out who you are. And the first thing that's going to happen is you're going to have a lot of doubts. I will tell you, leaving the military after being in uniform for 31 years, I know this for a fact because I'm watching my adult children doing the same thing. It's like leaving college and trying to figure out how to be an adult, right? So I've in service for 31 years, but I don't know anything about taxes, right? Personal property tax, because I was completely exempt from the state of California while I was in, right? And then suddenly I'm out, and California and Virginia are like, "Hey, you owe us taxes." I'm like, "Wait." You're trying to figure out your health care. You're trying to figure out all these different things that, to the average adult, they learned, when they were 19 and 20. And here we are, because we've been inside this ecosystem. And so there's going to be a lot of self-doubt and a lot of imposter syndrome. And we have to figure out how to translate our military jargon into skills on a resume that resonate with an employer who already has a preconceived idea that we all have PTSD, or that we're all, fill in the blank. Right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of outside influence and forces so really my advice would be, if you're especially getting into the creative space, is keep track of what you're doing so that you can see your own growth. Okay. So I think it's important to have a website, even if it's only inward facing. It doesn't have to be forward facing, right? Maybe it's just for you. Keep your early work. Every time you do new work, put it in this website so you can visually see your own growth. I mean, I have seen headshots out there of mine from 7 and 8 years ago, and I'm like, please take them down. I'm so much better. But it's important. I still have my own. I have every single picture I've ever taken. And when I look at the journey that just a headshot has taken, from looking like a pink salmon person, regardless of what their ethnicity was, to an actual, greatly
Yeah.
it's phenomenal. And that gives me strength, and it also gives me a little bit more motivation that, okay, look how, give myself credit, Laura. Wow, look how far I've come, right? Or look how much when I see my annual revenue and it's more than, the year before. And I also keep very, very detailed notes in my, I use my business plan as an analytical tool for myself. And every year I summarize what's working and what's not working. I mentioned I'm an overachiever, right? So I've got pie charts. I can tell you, what
Yeah.
the headshots versus events are doing well and how many and why. But to see like the one chart I love is my revenue growth, that started at $2,000 when I first started. And, full disclosure, over 100,000 for the last 2 years.
Wow.
Right.
Congratulations. Yeah.
Thank you, which sounds like a lot, but just don't forget half of that goes towards taxes. So
Right. So know. Yeah. How it's
yeah, that was a rude awakening. I'm like,
Ooh.
wow, I made $100,000. Wait
Right.
a minute.
Right. But I think, gosh, I just love that because whether you're looking at the pictures, and seeing the progress over time, looking at the numbers, like there are the facts to show that growth and it gets you out of your head. Like you can think whatever you want, but there are facts in front of your face that are showing you're doing a great job and you are learning and you are growing and you're, all of the things like, and sometimes I get very much in my head too. And I'm like, nah, like I'm not doing anything. But then I look back a year ago, I'm like, oh my gosh, what I see about furniture now and what I'm doing today, I know so much more and I'm selling these pieces for a little bit more. And so I just think that like that, it's such great advice because it really does help you get out of your head and focus on like, no, you are actually doing things that are making improvements and it can be seen. And, honestly, I think your level of detail with the graphs and everything is so important too, because we really can keep track of that more and more over time. Um, I just think that
Yeah. And I keep studio journals as well, right? So every year I open a journal and I list out the first page. It's my lessons learned from the year before, my goals for the year coming, and then I also have a new year checklist. Right? There's always the same things I have to do at the new year, and if I don't do that, then March, April, I'm like, did I change the copyrights on my camera? Or has it said 2024 for the last 3 months?
yeah.
Those kind of things. And so, because there's a lot of recurring tasks that you have as a business owner, and we should be able to, at least I feel like I should be able to anticipate a lot of things, so that it's not just flying by the seat of my pants. And that to me is the fact that I'm maturing as a business owner, right? That I can anticipate certain things and I understand my numbers and I understand, the workflow and I've set up processes. And that's another way of determining that you've got growth, right? That you could afford some of the tools that help you grow, right? That you're
Yeah.
making money, that you can afford those subscriptions that give you a great website or give you a great customer relationship management system, which,
Yep.
And understanding where to invest in your time as well. But yeah,
Yeah.
be kind to yourself.
Yeah, right there. That is really important too. That's self-talk that you mentioned. Like it's very easy to go down the path of just being really rude to yourself when you're learning something new because you're going to make a lot of mistakes. And I think, well, if you can't make mistakes, then why even bother? At least that's what I tell myself. Because
Yeah.
it's like I have to. If I don't make them, I'm never going to learn. And to be comfortable with making those mistakes and be comfortable with learning and be comfortable with slow growth. I think sometimes we see things, at least I know I see things on Instagram and I'm like, oh, this person, made X, Y, and Z over 24 hours. Or I don't know, they're like posting things
Yeah.
about furniture. I'm like, that's not the reality of it. Like it can take
No.
years and that's actually even better than it just happening overnight
And
sometimes.
then another thing I would add too is, and I tend to tell myself at the end of the day, did you get paid? Yes. Then what do you care what so and so thinks about?
Mm.
Your client liked what you did. Your client paid you. That's their thank you. Move along, Laura. Stop scrolling.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. So true. Just the facts. Again, going back to the facts and just making that real. Like, okay, your head, you're going to feel certain ways. You're going to, all these things that you might be thinking. But at the end of the day, yeah, you got paid. And yeah. So, Laura, one thing that you mentioned earlier was, this your childhood self, and you were moving around a lot, and the things that your dad would tell you, and I'm curious if there was something that you could tell your childhood self about where you are now. What would you tell her?
I probably would tell her not to be so obsessed about fitting in, right? Which I think every young girl growing up has that challenge. And 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 for me, it was even more hard because, moving around with a military family, but I'm of two ethnicities. My biological father, who passed away when I was in college, he was African American. My mother is British and about as white as they come with beautiful red hair when I was growing up. So I never fit in, um, culturally, ethnically, genderly, if that's a word, right? And I'm constantly moving around. And oh, by the way, my stepfather who raised me was Puerto Rican. So just throw all of those, and it's funny, my own children, my eldest son taught me a term that I wasn't even aware of when I was younger. It's called third culture kid, right? So you have several cultures. You have the one that your family is in, you have the one that you live in, and then you have the one that your family has to adapt to because of those other two, right? And we were constantly moving into different places where I always try to fit in, and I didn't because I was a new kid or because, especially in high school, it was challenging. My mother and my stepfather was a disciplinarian, so there was lots of rules, right? Yeah. Lots of rules, and most of them included like not going out, not having a curfew because why? You don't have a boyfriend because you don't. We're not. That's a rule, right? So anytime that you're a child and you don't have the same privileges as your classmates, you stick out, right? My mother also believed in making me wear dresses. I had to be a lady, and so I mean, I went to high school in San Diego. Can you imagine? Yeah, only coming to school in the '80s in dresses when with the pop culture that was going on. Yeah, I always stuck out. So I would tell her, you know, it doesn't matter if you don't fit in because, these people or this situation is not going to last, right? There's so much more. But I get it. I mean, I had the same conversations with my kids growing up, and you just have to, unfortunately, sometimes suffer through it, right? The bullies and the naysayers and everything else. But I do think that's important because I think technology has made it so much easier for children to be picked on, to have self-esteem issues, or, childhood suicides, all of those, way more than when we grew up. Not putting you in my age category, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. No, I agree. I can't imagine being a kid with social media at school. I got picked on so much as a kid. And so I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would be hard.
Yeah, it really would be. But Laura, you have done some amazing work and you continue to just show up and lead the way to do more and inspire others to do more. And I want people to be able to connect with you and see your work. And how do they do that? Where do they find you?
Yeah. So if you're on the socials, it's probably easier to tell you where I'm not.
Yeah. There we go.
I'm on LinkedIn because my main platform has been LinkedIn because that's where my audience is, right? I'm talking to those veterans that are leaving and they need a headshot. So LinkedIn is the main place. But I am on Instagram. I started on Instagram because I wanted to stalk my kids. But now they stalk me. So it's kind of cool. I'm also on Facebook, not a fan of Instagram or Facebook, but I understand, in order to be a business, it's a necessary evil. I'm also on YouTube. And of course, my website is laurahatcherphotography.com. So
amazing. Laura, thank you so much for being here with me today, for sharing your story. You're an absolute joy. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I had fun. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of The Career Flipper. You can connect with Laura using the links in the show notes. And hey, if you like this episode, go ahead and subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It helps other career flippers find the show, and let's be real, figuring out this career stuff is way easier when you know you're not the only one winging it. If you got your own career flip story to share, head over to thecareerflipper.com to send me your story. I'd love to hear it and consider you for a potential future episode. If you're ever looking for someone to talk and blab on and on about this career flipping stuff as a speaker for your team or an event or one-on-one coaching, I do those things. Just reach out to me directly. hello@thecareerflipper.com. You know what I love most about this podcast and this topic in general is that the chance that someone out there might hear these stories and think, okay, maybe I can take the first step. And that first step, yeah, it's really scary, but it's also where everything begins. Even if it's messy, even if it makes zero sense. Keep going, my friend. What's the best that could happen?